So I want you now to go to searchparams.js, and we're going to make all the buttons use our theme context. So at the top here, I want you to import theme context from /theme context. And we're also going to get another hook from React called use context. Okay, and then up here underneath pets, we're going to say const theme. And keep in mind that this also comes with a set theme as well. But we're not going to use the set theme, so I'm just not going to grab it. So const theme equals use context theme context. So again, theme context could be anything. This could be an object. It doesn't necessarily have to be an array or a hook or anything like that. They're just convenient to use with each other, but they are more flexible than that. So now I have this theme, which is available to use. So I'm going to go down to my button. Here, this submit button, and I'm going to say style equals, and just do some inline CSS like a professional. Just kidding. Don't do this, but so typically you would expect this to be like color : blank or something like that, right? React makes it a little bit easier that you can just give it an object. So I'm just going to say color theme like that. Now notice there are two curly braces next to each other, but notice they're colored differently. That's because this is an object, right? And this is the JavaScript expression from JSX thing. So that it's not that two curly braces next to each other have any sort of special meaning in JSX. That just happens to be how that looks. Okay, so now if you go over and look at our project, oh sorry, you don't want color, you want background color. I mean, notice it still worked, right? The color of this is blue, but that's not what I intended. I intended this to be background color. And there you go. Now it's dark blue. But let's talk about, I mean, obviously this was a lot of ritual to get very little benefit out of it, but let's talk about why this was important. I have app.js here on the top, right, which I've wrapped in this theme provider. And then inside of search params, notice I haven't passed anything into search params. Typically you would have had to do something like theme color equals theme, right? And you'd have to do the same thing with details and pass it into every individual piece of your application that read from the theme, right? That's burdensome, right? You get to a certain point where it gets more burdensome than it's useful, right? So that's where these contexts are super useful, that instead of having to pass this explicitly into search params, now I can go into search params, and I can read off of the context. Now, I could have infinite layers between me and the provider and it still works, right? It just happens to be that it's the immediate parent that has the provider, but there could be 17 layers. And actually, if you look at the reach router code, like inside of your Explorer, let's actually just look at that right now. Inspect element, React, they use context everywhere. So you can see there, context provider, forward ref, context consumer. They have a bunch of stuff in here. Context consumer, context provider. Like there's a bunch of layers of consumers and providers. That all has to do with context. So it's really easy to use with use context, which is a hook, right? Before we move on to how to do it with classes, does anyone have any questions about what you've seen so far?
So to use the use context hook, the provider, the context provider, has to be a parent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.